Where escape ends. The veil lay lower than usual over the middle mountains that morning, thicker where the slopes rose and the stone narrowed. It gathered and moved, swallowed colour and light. The air tasted of cold water and old rock, damp earth settling heavy in the lungs as the veil held its breath and listened. Alenya crouched among stone and sparse brush, just above the base of the mountains, her back pressed into a shallow hollow where the wind could not reach. Her breath came in ragged pulls, each inhale snagging in her chest, her lungs shuddering as she forced the air back out. Her fingers were so numb she could not tell whether the shaking came from cold or weakness, only that she could not stop it. Below, the lake spread wide and grey, its surface blurred by mist. Even from this height it looked endless, depth swallowing distance until shore and sky became one. She had heard stories, but they had never carried scale like this. Only fragments, traded in whispers, of a fey refuge in the eastern mountains. But from here, the east felt unreachable. Swimming, even breath beneath water, should have come as easily as air. Her lake lady mother was little more than a dream now, a face blurred by time, but the lineage remained, and it should have given her an affinity for the water. However, it did not. She did not know the details, only that she had been shaped in the depths of Saltgrave, bred for human desire, born beautiful and wrong, with no true claim to land or water. The result was beauty unmistakably fey and unmistakably altered. Deep blue hair hung long around her shoulders, skin with a glassy sheen that caught even the tiniest light, faint blue veins tracing beneath the surface like delicate yet beautiful fault lines, ears longer than any natural-born fey, stormwater teal eyes ringed dark at the iris, long fingers with translucent nails, a slender body arranged with careful symmetry. Even like this, strained and hollowed by fear, she was completely enthralling. She tore her eyes from the lake and scanned the land, listening more than watching. Nothing moved, only wind threading through bush and trees, no footsteps, no clink of metal, only birds and the slow lap of water below. Still, she did not let herself believe she was alone. The memory of Highreach scraped down her bones like needles. Human desire had owned her body too long, their poison threaded through her veins and crept through nightmares made solid. Escape had been impossible, until a single moment aligned in her favour, a slither of a chance where there had been none. She took it. She slipped into tight stone water tunnels beneath the city. Feeling her way along slick walls, the slime still clung to her palms even now. The channel was black and narrow, water rising to her waist, sometimes her chest, the current pressing hard against her legs as her bare feet fought to keep her upright. The tunnels went on longer than she thought possible, and time passed way too quickly. Highreach had been built over more layers than any one person was meant to understand. Pipes, trains, forgotten passages, places where the city discarded its filth and assumed it would disappear into darkness. She followed the water until the passage narrowed, the current tightened into channels too thin and water too deep. Somewhere in that choking dark, a break revealed itself, a seam of soft light, a grate bent just enough for fingers to slide beneath. She paused, listened, then pushed through. Air met her, stale, heavy, but air all the same. Her eyes adjusted to dark streets and narrow alleys where the sparse lantern light fell unevenly and hid from corners. The stink of old smoke lingered. Her bare feet stuck to the ground in places where things had spilled and dried. She moved through shadow, keeping close to walls, breathing shallow, hearing her own pulse too loud in her ears. She had one night before they noticed. That knowledge drove her every step, drove her past the point where fear became constant, past the point where pain sang through bone, past the point where her body demanded rest. She kept moving because stopping meant recapture. It would not be long before her owner sent hunters, humans trained to track and retrieve whatever money claimed. So she moved faster, beyond Highreach, east along a river's edge, over sharp stone and through grasping brush. The memory of her escape loosened its grip, and the stone beneath her returned, the middle mountains behind, the lake before her. She had been bred to be noticed. Now she fought to disappear, knowing her pursuers would not be far behind. Her feet were cut and bruised, the skin along the edges torn open. Dried blood darkened her ankles, and dizziness threatened to overcome her mind and body. She could not afford to stay here. The lake below had turned from open water to a wall, and the truth struck her all at once. East was no longer possible. What had been her only direction, the single thread pulling her forward, dissolved beneath her feet. She drew a sharp breath and forced herself to look elsewhere. To the northeast, the land opened into wide plains, pale and stripped bare, trees taken and never returned. There would be no crossing that distance unseen, nowhere to hide, nowhere to break her outline against the horizon. To the southeast, the land softened into carved slopes and long fields that spoke of farms and labour, less exposed, but still open enough to betray her movement. Either way she turned, she would be visible from far, a pale wrong shape moving across human ground. Behind her, somewhere far below, a sound carried that did not belong to the wind, a faint metallic tap, steel against stone. Hunters. Not close yet, but soon. She lowered herself again, breathing through a tight throat, and felt the answer settle in her body before her mind could shape it. The only direction left was up. The mountains would not offer safety like the east had promised, but they were the only option left. The rock was sharp and unstable, shifting underfoot. Loose gravel slid away with each step. The tree line thinned as she climbed, branches becoming sparse and twisted, growing in angles that spoke of harsh wind and poor soil. The veil thickened, gathering against her skin, cooling sweat until the chill seeped into bone. With each trembling step she climbed higher. The veil pressed against her face, heavy enough to make each breath more work than the last. Sound dulled until even her own movements felt distant, as though she were climbing into a dream she could not wake from. The world narrowed to the space directly in front of her, to the next rock, the next bush, the next handhold. She could hear them now, not constantly, but often enough, the unmistakable sounds of hunters, their human presence carrying upward to meet her desperate steps. They would be slower here. The height was not kind to humans, but it was not kind to her either. She was Fae, yes, but she had not been born beneath the veil the way many other Fae had. In the West it was treated as little more than weather, a nuisance, a rumour, something humans dismissed as superstition, something blurred and smudged by pollution. She had never known its weight until now. Never felt its thick cloth-like pressure that made breathing almost unbearable. Her body began to fail in stages, a tremor in her thighs that would not stop, blurred vision when she looked down, missteps where her feet did not land right. Once she stumbled hard enough that her knee slammed into stone, skin split, a scream rose and died behind her hand as she pressed it over her mouth. She listened, certain the sound had carried. Nothing answered, only pain throbbing louder than her heart. She forced herself upright and felt the cold warm against her skin before the cold stole even that. She climbed the rock methodically until she reached a ridge too steep to scale. She was left with no choice but to edge along it. Small stones shifted and gave way beneath her feet until one misplaced step sent her sliding. Stone tore at her skin as she scraped downward, landing hard into a shallow hollow. Hopelessness and pain washed over her, and with them a small, dangerous thought. A thought to lie here and let it end. To be found, to stop fighting. Perhaps she would have, but something caught her stormwater gaze. A narrow opening in the rock, almost a crack, but wide enough for her frail, malnourished body. Alenya pulled herself upright on shaking limbs and staggered toward the opening. She pressed her hands to the stone and forced her slender body into the narrow space. Rock scraped skin from her shoulders, but she fit. Her breath echoed too loudly in the tight, dark space, bouncing back warm and panicked against her face. The air smelled of old mineral and something faintly alive like moss or damp earth. She stepped, she squeezed, she crawled. Knees scraping, elbows raw, fingers slipping on wet stone, panic rising in sharp waves she could not afford. At one point she stopped and pressed her forehead to the rock, nearly turning back. The panic was too much, suffocating her. Breath failed her. Stone crowded close. The dark pressed in with a promise of death. But turning back, if it were even possible, offered her no better fate. She drew one shallow breath. Pain throbbed and grounded. The panic loosened its grip. She continued forward. The crack widened in places and narrowed in others. She climbed over fallen stones, skirted sudden drops, dragged her body across edges that tore at skin. Her breath hitched, steadied, then hitched again. The world reduced to darkness and pressure in the single demand to keep moving. Then air shifted slightly. The rock around her changed temperature. A faint wash of light reached her, and the space widened just a little. She crawled forward, half blind, and her body spilled out of stone and into green. At first she thought she had died and fallen into some strange afterlight. The veil here was still present, but thinner, as if it had lifted slightly. The air felt different, rich, with a scent of damp leaves and dark soil. Sound was softened, not muffled. The kind of quiet that belongs to a living forest, not to fog. Dense trees surrounded her, their trunks dark and broad. High stone ridges rose around the pocket of forest like a ring, enclosing it in on all sides. The ground lay thick with leaves and moss. The world felt suspended here, in a way the rest of the mountain had not. Alenya did not know if she had escaped the hunters, did not know if they still followed. She had heard nothing since slipping through the rock, but she no longer trusted her hearing or even her own mind. She pulled herself up onto legs that shook violently. She took one step, then another, 5, 10, 20, she no longer knew. Then her foot failed. It slid on moss and her body followed. Her knees slammed into moss-covered ground, her palms sinking into damp earth. Breath short, ragged. She tried to stand again, failed. Her whole body shook, her vision narrowed at the edges until the forest became a tunnel of dark trunks and pale mist. She moved on her knees, then her hands, crawling deeper without knowing why, only that stopping was worse. A large stone lay ahead, cold and smooth, half embedded in the ground. She tried to crawl around it, but her arms simply failed. Her elbows buckled, her body struck the earth. For a moment she lay there, face turned to the side, cheek against wet moss, eyes open but unfocused. Then she pushed herself onto one elbow and curled in on herself beside the stone, as though it might shield her from whatever came next. Her breath shuddered in and out, her body went limp. Had she ever truly believed she would escape? Perhaps this glimpse of the world would have to be enough. A memory instead of a future, a moment where she had almost felt freedom and not dark, greedy hands trying to claim her. She had no answers, and her body no longer cared to look for them. It had reached its limits before her feet touched the streets of Highreach. Before she hurried east, before she climbed a mountain, and long before she crawled into the rock. Somehow she had pushed beyond each and every limit, but now it was done. All she could do now was listen, the forest holding its breath with her. Then, footsteps in leaves. Her stomach tightened, her heart kicked hard, then stuttered with exhaustion. She did not attempt to flee. She could not have, even if she tried. Her limbs were heavy, her body beyond pain, her mind thick and slow as mud. The footsteps grew louder until they stopped near her head. She expected iron, leather boots, the scrape of metal. Instead, she saw bare feet stained by earth, soft cloth wrapped around ankles. She forced her eyes to focus. A face leaned into view, not human nor a hunter. The features were unfamiliar, but unmistakably fey. They spoke, perhaps to her. Alenya heard the words clear, but they simply slid uselessly from her mind, no matter how hard she grasped at them. A second set of feet came into view, a second voice threaded with worry. Their gaze moved over her with careful attention that felt like assessment rather than pity. One hand hovered, withdrew. Another hovered, then pressed lightly at her throat to check for breath. The Fae turned their heads, gaze sweeping the trees beyond Alenya, listening for what lay beneath the forest's quiet. Alenya's eyes fluttered, the pain screamed, the world began to swim. Hands, gentle but firm, turned her slightly, searching for hidden weapons or threat. She wanted to flinch, to speak, but her body would not obey. They lifted her, neither roughly nor kindly, and carried her as one might carry something breakable. Her body hung limp in their arms as they moved through trees and along narrow paths, her consciousness thinning. She felt her body being placed on something soft. She tried to speak again, tried to move, but hands stilled her. Something warm settled over her. Her eyes would no longer open. They too had faded with her voice and body, her breath shortened as darkness gathered in at the edges. As she surrendered to the dark, the last thing she registered was the press of a hand against her face.